Alberta Primetime with Michael Higgins.
Welcome to Alberta Primetime. Ahead tonight, our politics panel on what the polls are saying about Albertans and separation. But first, the petition waiting in the wings.
We're going to have to put that to a committee because it's a little bit more complicated, being that he's now withdrawn his request to have it go to a general referendum. And we have to consider that.
The Premier on Alberta Primetime last week on having yet to signal how her government will deal with Thomas Lukaszuk's successful Forever Canadian petition, a campaign that far exceeded the province's threshold for signatures needed to initiate a possible referendum more than 3 months ago. And Thomas Lukaszuk joins us now. Thomas, good to see you. Welcome back.
Thank you for having me back.
All right, to start, quick reaction to what the Premier had to say there about your petition and where it currently lands on the government's radar.
Well, I don't know what reality the Premier lives in. It's completely a lie. I have not withdrawn anything. There is no way to withdraw anything. Our petition with 556,000 signatures have been filed with Elections Alberta, has been certified and approved, and is now in Premier's hands in the legislature. Nothing has been amended, nothing has been withdrawn, nothing has been changed. I have no clue what the Premier is talking about.
Okay, so now petition aside, you remain very active in this space. What are you prepared to pivot the Forever Canadian campaign to now?
So we have been actually working very hard, our group of volunteers and organizers over the last couple of months, pivoting this campaign, because it's a totally different campaign to collect signatures compared to fighting a referendum. So we are now ready, and we will be making some announcements within the next couple of weeks, I imagine. First of all, there are some very significant groups of Albertans joining Forever Canadian, so I'm very excited to announce that. But we also will be launching somewhat of an educational campaign, sharing with Albertans the facts about separatism and what it would actually mean to an average Alberta family. And also, we will be further, collecting lists of supporters to make sure that on referendum day, we can make sure that everybody comes out and votes.
Okay, why go to this effort when the latest polls suggest a majority of Albertans are pro-Canadian and opposed to separation?
They always have. There isn't a poll that combined hardcore separatists with the tire kickers, the softcore separatists, has ever exceeded 30%. But as we know, our Premier is hellbent to have a referendum because the statistics are different within her own UCP party. Looks like majority of UCP party supporters and a large contingent of MLAs are pro-separatists, and they demand a referendum, and the Premier is somewhat beholden to them. So I am on the assumption, because I cannot not be on the assumption that there will be a referendum. So it's incumbent upon Forever Canadian to be ready for a referendum because, on a balance of probability, looking at the Premier's disposition towards this issue, we will have a referendum in this province, and we have to be prepared.
Okay, so you're fairly certain then that the pro-separatist group's petition will be successful in meeting the government's new lower threshold?
Look, it's hard to predict, but I managed to collect nearly 500,000 signatures in 90 days without any help from the Premier. This group now, with the assistance of Alberta government, has to collect half the number in 4 months as opposed to 3 months. They've been preparing for it for 2 years. I had literally 1 day to prepare. I imagine that they will collect the required number of signatures, and if they don't, I imagine that the Premier will find another reason to have a referendum on this issue, because this group, who now is the majority of the UCP party, demands a referendum one way or the other.
As a former cabinet minister, former deputy premier, what's to be made of claims that UCP MLAs have already signed the petition? A number as high as 19, according to the Republican Party of Alberta.
That is unfortunate. And MLAs have the right to sign any petition out there. I can tell you that I don't know of any MLAs that signed the Forever Canadian petition because we weren't soliciting their signatures. But for an MLA of any political party or for a member of parliament of any political party to sign this petition, there is a problem. Because the only reason MLAs are MLAs and particularly cabinet ministers, is because they swore an oath of allegiance to the crown. When I was in legislature, I swore an oath of allegiance to Queen Elizabeth II, now to King Charles. So the only reason they get paid by taxpayers, by the crown, and they get to use the logo and stationery and sit in that chamber is because they actually swore on the Bible or some other holy book their allegiance to the crown. So to be collecting a paycheck as an MLA and at the same time working to break up Canada and Alberta to leave the crown is problematic. I think MLA should sit out and allow this process to take place and do what I'm asking the Premier to do, have a vote in the legislature. And then if you want to rise in the legislature and say that you think Alberta should separate from Canada, all power to you. But to be working on behalf of separatists as an MLA, I think one should resign the seat first.
If we go back to the polling, and the polling we referenced earlier was Angus Reid, and it's that 30-70 split. But Angus Reid also asked about handling of the separation debate. The PM tops the list. Net approval rating +7. You and Jason Kenney next at +3. Nahid Netchi follows at +1. Then the Premier, Danielle Smith, at -17. How political do you make the Forever Canadian campaign when you see numbers like that?
Well, this is a political issue. Nothing is more political than keeping our country united and together. But it is not a partisan issue. At least I am making sure that Forever Canadian is not partisan. So we have from former reformers to liberals to New Democrats working on our campaign. And it's no secret to any Albertan or any Canadian that Mr. Kenney and I have not seen eye to eye on many policy issues. And we fought like cats and dogs when both of us were ministers at the same time. But I welcome Mr. Kenney, and I would proudly stand next to him and Prime Minister Harper and Prime Minister Chrétien and former Liberal leader Dion on the same stage, fighting for a united Canada and for preserving our integrity while we are actually challenged by foreign powers. So this is a nonpartisan issue. This is a situation where, whether we like each other or not, we set all that aside. We are all proud Canadians, and we are in the same trenches together.
As political as it is, do you take it as far as creating party status or looking to?
Well, I don't have any political aspirations, and I'm doing this simply because I have a lot of gratitude to Canada. As you can tell, I wasn't born here. Canada has created an amazing opportunity for my family and millions of other immigrants. I also understand how fragile the situation now is geopolitically, and how we cannot be divided internally. I hate the situations that Albertans are not talking to each other because this issue is so divisive. I also saw what happened in Quebec and how the economy in Quebec was devastated by flirting with separatism. I don't want any of that to happen in Canada. So I'm doing this because I'm just passionate. I love this country, but I'm not running for any office. But you're right. A lot of people are questioning me. Am I going to run as a leader for some political party or maybe run federally? I always say never, but this is not a priority. We have to win this referendum. We have to win it with a high majority. So we put separatism to bed. And then, if opportunity arises and if it interests me at that point, maybe, but it's not in the cards right now.
Okay. We'll have to leave it there for time. Appreciate your time, Thomas. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thomas Lukaszuk, former Deputy Premier, lead proponent behind the Forever Canadian campaign. From getting a read on the latest sovereignty polls and the role of the Forever Canadian campaign moving forward, to the prospect of voting again on the issue of time change. Time now for tonight's politics panel. And joining us this evening, Mount Royal University political scientist Laurie Williams and John Brennan, political analyst and commentator. Good evening to you both. And let's begin with the latest polling on the contentious issue of separation. According to the Angus Reid Institute, nearly a third of Albertans would either vote to leave or are leaning toward it. The vast majority, though, want to stay.
it's the intensity factor here that I think really stands out. Right now, the intensity is with the stay side as opposed to the leave side.
In an online survey conducted early in the month, Angus Reid found 57% of participating Albertans would vote in a referendum to stay, with an additional 8% saying they would lean towards staying. The other side of the coin, 8% would definitely leave, 21% leaning towards leaving. Laurie, at a time when there is so much news coverage and images on social media of those lengthy lineups for signing the petition for a referendum on separation, how do you see these poll numbers playing?
Well, this tells us the lay of the land at the moment. It's pretty consistent with what we've seen up until this point. But a referendum vote isn't just about public opinion polling when they're reaching out to participants. It depends on who actually comes out and votes. And those who are really motivated to come out and vote can skew the result, as we saw certainly in Brexit, to take one example. The other thing is, at this level, this level of support could lead, as we're seeing with other referendum questions in history, could lead to the question being asked more than once. In other words, separatists who say, well, we're at 30%, let's push and see if we can get more next time around. There's a real urgency, in my view, to try to talk about what this means, because what it means is varied. Different people think it'll have different implications. Some think they just want to give a stronger bargaining chip to Alberta in negotiations with Ottawa. Some people think that if they vote actually in a referendum to leave, that will also just put us in a stronger bargaining position to stay in Canada. And these things don't line up. There are all kinds of people in that lineup who say they think they'll still have passports, or just want to send, that is Canadian passports, they just want to send a message to Ottawa. This is playing with political fire. It really could have huge implications for the future, not just of our province, but of our country. And I think that message has to be conveyed far and wide by a number of different people, like Thomas Lukaszuk, Mark Carney, Stephen Harper, you and I talking to friends and acquaintances as we're in lineups and so forth. All of that is going to be absolutely critical to putting this into perspectives where we have a better understanding of what that vote might actually mean.
Okay, so John, 60+% of those polled say they don't want independence. Now, inside of that, of those, 3/4 say they would be prepared to move to another part of Canada. What does that say about how divisive a debate could be developing here?
Well, it's going to be incredibly divisive, Michael. And let's remember, this is totally unnecessary. There is no need to have this referendum debate. Because the country as a whole should be focusing on the existential threat that the country faces from Donald Trump and from the United States. And we saw his latest barrage yesterday with regards to the new Gordie Howe Bridge crossing between Windsor and Detroit. You know, it is unnecessary that we're having this debate, but because the Premier made it easier for the separatists to have their referendum, it looks like we're going to have this debate, and it looks like we're going to have this referendum, although it's still not clear what she's going to do with Thomas Lukaszuk's referendum, which has already been approved by Elections Alberta. So it looks to me, Michael, like we might have a ballot probably sometime in the fall where we're going to have two questions. One, do you want to stay in Canada? And one, do you want Alberta to separate from Canada? It's absolutely ridiculous because it just creates more anxiety and more uncertainty at a time when we don't need anxiety and uncertainty.
Laurie, we heard from Thomas Lukaszuk off the top. What is to be made of how he is preparing to pivot the Forever Canadian campaign?
Well, it's an important part in I think, the bigger picture, getting information out about what separation might mean, particularly on the economic side. I don't think we've heard enough from those voices who can give a bit of a sense of what this could cost. We know that it costs dearly Quebecers in both their referenda, that they lost a lot of economic advantage because of toying with a referendum and creating all of this economic uncertainty. That is, I think, a critical piece of information to have. The argument being made by those who support separation is that we'll be better off economically. And I think there are important questions to be asked about what are the net benefits and burdens of federalism and what might the costs of that be. Now, some won't be amenable to that information, but this uncertainty, the divisions that potentially could could erupt in the midst of this at a time, as John has pointed out, where most Canadians want to come together and try to deal with the challenges that are coming south of the border. We're seeing how provinces coming together, pooling their resources, taking the benefits of what Canada is and can be in negotiating new deals with other countries, building new alliances on a number of different levels. All of those advantages could be in jeopardy as a result of even flirtations with federalism, with separatism rather. And here we're dealing with something different than has happened before. In previous referendum campaigns in Canada, we haven't seen active encouragement coming out of the United States, but it's being both sought by some of the separatist leaders. This loan guarantee that they're pursuing certainly raises questions about whether it would be economically feasible, much less advantageous, to leave Canada. But the fact that the Treasury Secretary and the President are talking about dividing Canada, sort of dividing us economically and taking over, all of those, I think, are really important questions to engage, and they make this a much more potentially problematic campaign than otherwise might be the case.
John, Thomas Lukaszuk turned up in that Angus Reid polling as well, as we discussed with him. He had a considerably higher approval rating than the Premier for handling of this separation debate. At what point do you see Forever Canadian pivoting to something even more political?
Well, I think Thomas Lukaszuk made it clear in his interview with you, Michael, that he's planning on revving up a campaign. You know, Thomas Lukaszuk was a politician for a long time. He knows how to campaign, and he knows that there's going to be a referendum campaign sometime later this year, I suspect in the fall. And so he knows that he and the Forever Canadian volunteers need to get organized and need to be prepared to wage a campaign like you would an election campaign. That means an organization. That means volunteers. That means communications materials. That means an online presence. That means a social media campaign. So I took from his interview with you, Michael, that he is organizing to run a full-fledged campaign in this referendum like it was an election campaign, and he's going to, be one of the champions of the Canadian side. And as Laurie said earlier, along with people like Jason Kenney and Stephen Harper and Mark Carney, like there's a lot of political leaders in this country that are going to step up on the pro-Canadian side.
All right, time for us to take a bit of a break. But when we come back, the issue of time change and talk of another referendum. More from our politics panel in a moment. Welcome back. With all the focus on the prospect of a separation referendum, the Premier says she's considering another vote, one that would make time change a referendum question.
And I think maybe what we need to do is just say, do you want to end the time change? So then we can sort of do some consultation about whether we want standard time year-round or daylight time year-round. Like right now, 8 months of the year, we're on daylight time. And so it kind of makes sense to me that we would stay on daylight time. In October of 2021, Alberta held a referendum on the time change in conjunction with a municipal election. It resulted in a vote of 50.2% in favor of continuing the twice-yearly time change. The Premier has indicated on past radio shows that the question was not as clear as it could have been. Laurie, what does the government gain by doing this?
I don't know. I think it actually detracts from much more serious issues that I think Albertans have a profound interest in weighing in on. And the other thing I think that is striking about it is that we've got a referendum where there was a decision, and because it was close, it's coming back or being considered to be brought back for another referendum. And I think that's sadly a prospect of what's to come, that if you don't get the number you want on whatever issue it happens to be, then you can try again and again, and endless referendums, or what they called in Quebec the never-endum, could be a factor of life. And again, daylight saving time may not have a lot of economic implications, but separation does.
John, bare majority last time around, how does that outcome in 2021 play into the need then for doing it all over again?
Well, I don't think there is a need to do it all over again, Michael. You know, we had a referendum in 2021 and the people spoke, but apparently Danielle Smith didn't like the answer. And of course, the thing is with Danielle Smith, she has a simplistic answer to everything. Oh, we should just stay on daylight time. I can remember during the course of that referendum campaign, Michael, there was a lot of stakeholders that raised objections to the idea of not changing the clocks in the spring and in the fall. Especially, I recall, was the professional hockey teams in Edmonton and Calgary that had issues with start times and games and television coverage. So there's a lot to this issue rather than just what Danielle Smith said in her radio show. But apparently, if you call into Danielle Smith's radio show and suggest a topic for a referendum, she's game to look at it.
All right, for us, one more topic. That is the bizarre dialogue, shall we call it, building over the new Gordie Howe Bridge set to be open later this year between Windsor and Detroit, something the U.S. president is now threatening to block. The prime minister, though, says he spoke with Donald Trump about it this morning.
I explained that Canada, of course, paid for the construction of the bridge, over $4 billion, that the ownership is shared between the state of Michigan and the government of Canada, and that in the construction of the bridge, obviously there's Canadian steel, Canadian workers, but also U.S. steel, U.S. workers that are involved. This is a great example of cooperation between our countries.
Yeah, in a lengthy social media post, the U.S. president says he will not allow the bridge to open until, quote, the United States is fully compensated for everything we have given them, and also Canada treats the United States with the fairness and respect that we deserve. We will start negotiations immediately. John, is this as simple as Donald Trump looking create some form of leverage ahead of Kuzma talks?
It's just Donald Trump spewing off on social media again, Michael, which he does, if not daily, weekly. You know, he continues to attack Canada, he continues to belittle Canada, continues to say we should be the 51st state, and now, of course, he's calling Mark Carney the governor like he did to Justin Trudeau before him. You know, it's absolutely ridiculous, but I will say this. Thank God we have Mark Carney as our prime minister. Cool, calm, collected. He calls Donald Trump, explains the situation to him. You know, it's like an adult talking to a toddler. I call Mark Carney the Trump whisperer. You know, he's able to calm down Donald Trump, explain the situation to him, and then everything is smoothed over. So, you know, I just see this as another rant from Donald Trump, and I think that Mark Carney and the government of Canada are handling it responsibly.
Laurie, it goes without saying, this is a brand new bridge. It's set to open at some point this year. Could it be that Donald Trump is simply angling to have it named after him instead of Mr. Hockey, Gordie Howe?
Well, who knows what is in Donald Trump's mind at any given moment, and it shifts and changes. It depends on who he last spoke to, what they said, what the concern of the moment is for him. It's a challenging thing to deal with, and I think steady is stable and as predictable on our side as is possible, but also leveraging some of the support that we see in the United States. I mean, this is a joint project between a state partner on the United States side and has full support of politicians and economic interests in that state. And I think if more economic interests across the United States try to start to put pressure both in terms of electoral prospects, I think that same strategy, although it's going to have to be multifaceted, is probably the best bulwark against the somewhat erratic behavior that comes out of Donald Trump, especially in the middle of the night.
All right. We have to leave it there for time. Great to see you both. Thank you for this.
Thank you, Michael.
Thanks, Michael.
Now, here are a few responses to a recent story posted by CTV News, and it is about Premier Danielle Smith floating the idea of another referendum on ending daylight saving time, a referendum that could be in the works. Hertz says, stop talking about it, just change it. Alexa thinks it should stay the way it is right now. No moving the clocks forward. Who needs daylight until 10:30 p.m.? I prefer more light in the morning. Shaha writes, just have it 30 minutes ahead permanently. Irwin thinks the time change is outdated and aggravating, just causes problems with everything. And Trev says, didn't we just have a vote on this? Have your say. Email us anytime at comments@alberta.ca. albertaprimetime.com. Coming up tomorrow with long lineups for the separation petition generating headlines, we'll take a look at amplification of dialogue around the divisive issue. Timothy Caulfield joins us on Wednesday. Until then, have a great evening, everyone, from all of us at Alberta Primetime. Thank you for watching, and join us again next time.